So I'm here in London today. I've got seen some friends down here, and I got a spare afternoon. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna pull from the depths of a old kind of like journal. I kind of keep journals, or like journals for ideas and stuff like that. And I always had this idea. In fact, I actually found it. I literally went through my all my old kind of like books and journals and stuff to try and find this particular one. And I'm talking, this is probably like probably getting on for like 15 years ago. I had this idea, maybe when I first started getting into photography. And the idea was called something like, here it is, post-apocalyptic London. I think at the time, well, I know at the time I was super into like zombies and stuff. It was like around the time of The Walking Dead and all that kind of stuff. And it says here, post-apocalyptic London, using a high-density ND filter, set up a camera on a tripod with a long exposure, shoot a busy scene in London, example, Trafalgar Square. A long exposure will capture the buildings as usual, as they're stationary, but people, cars, buses, anything that moves won't have enough time to develop. Considering I don't often have a free afternoon in London, I just thought I might as well try that idea, but I'm just going to try and do it on film. So what I've got today is I bought my Nikon F3. Oh, filter cap came off. And I bought a roll of 125 ISO film, which is a FP4 from Ilfords. And I bought some ND filters with me. 10-stop ND, so hopefully we can get our exposure time down to something where we've got a few minutes. What we're going to do is set up a few little shots around here and try and do some of those long exposures and erasing the people from the background. In my head, Trafalgar Square was just constant moving, busy people, but actually having been here for like maybe half an hour just scouting out the area, there's a lot of static people. There's a lot of static people. Whether they're just sitting around, chilling, having lunch, or, you know, just taking in the scene. So I'm not really entirely sure what to expect from this, but it'll be interesting either way. I don't think it's going to be any sort of groundbreaking photography, but it's certainly, I owe it to myself to maybe my 16, 17-year-old self to actually shoot this mini project. So yeah, we're going to start in Trafalgar Square, and then we're going to probably head up to Leicester Square and Piccadilly Circus. Basically, I'm just trying to think of busy places. So anyway, I've got to still try and find my first location, so let's have a little look. So I found like a little quiet corner. Honestly, I can't believe how many people are just staying still. I genuinely thought this was going to be so bustling that at some point every bit would be, I guess, like exposed. But really, I have very little faith that I'm going to get the effect that I was expecting all those years ago. But we're going to try it. We're shooting FP4. Ilford FP4. But to help us work out the exposure, brought along this iconic L358. So we're going to be taking a standard meter reading, and then we've got to try and work that back 10 stops to give us the equivalent with the filter that we're going to be putting on this thing. But there's once we have that calculation, we need to do one more thing because we're shooting film. The longer the film is exposed to light, the more the chemicals that the film is made up of actually degrade. And what that equates to is basically a decrease in ISO sensitivity. So you actually have to account for that and make your exposure even longer because your film is essentially lowering ISO the longer you have it open. And this whole process, this whole thing that happens to film is known as reciprocity failure. So if you're going to be doing any exposures longer than a second, you really need to look into this, otherwise your film's going to be severely underexposed basically. I've had a look on Ilfords' website, and you can see on there they actually have a formula for you to work out the actual reciprocity of each one of their films. But if not, you can just use an app. I'll show it up on screen now. I think it's just called Reciprocity Calculator. It might actually be a web page that I've just saved to my homepage. But yeah, you just type in your film and your initial exposure, and then it even gives you drop-down settings for if you have different types of filters on there. So I'll be able to actually do that. I'll be able to give it my initial exposure, and then it will tell me how long my exposure needs to be with the reciprocity and the filter applied. So we'll see what we come up with a little bit later. So our meter reading for 125 ISO is saying 30th of a second at f8. And we want to kind of get our shutter speed down to between a second and quarter of a second, because then when we lower that down by 10 stops, we're going to be dealing with like multiple minutes, maybe. It's going to be, you know, a chunk of time at least. This lens, I've got a 28 2.8 lens on here. The lowest this goes to, or the smallest aperture, is f22, and that gives me quarter of a second. So now I know my exposure. I now need to work out what that's going to be with 10 stops. So the web page I go to is just called Reciprocity Calculator. It's just I've got a Google link to my home page on my phone. So film sensor, we're going to be putting in Ilfords FP4 plus 125. Initial speed was quarter of a second, wasn't it? Yeah. 1/4 of a second. Initial aperture is f22. And then underneath the speeds and the aperture, you'll see the ability to add 2 filters. So we only need 1. And we're going to choose ND1000, which is 10 stops. Where is it on here? There you go. ND1024 or 1000. And that's minus 10 stops. So if we hit calculate, so at f22, with the initial speed of being quarter of a second, with a 10 stop ND, so we're now lowering it by 10 stops, and with the reciprocity, we're looking at an exposure of 18 minutes and 2 seconds. It's just a crazy long time. Thankfully, this gives you a list of all the other apertures and values that you could have. So I can lower it. If I put it to f11, I can have a 3-minute 8-second exposure. 30th of a second, I can have a 1-minute 18. So, you know, I might be able to lower it to a point where I'm not sat for like an hour, but I don't know. But I'll keep this up. Light's changing quite a lot now, which is going to be a bit of a problem. But anyway, I'm going to screenshot this and then maybe take another meter reading for the sun, and we'll see where we sit. And I'll have a look at the sky. It's looking pretty blue now, so I'll see what the weather's going to be like and work out how long our exposure is going to be. So in direct sunlight, we're now looking at f22 being 1 minute 25, whereas before it was f22 was 3 minutes. So, but now I know those 2 values. I'm gonna go find a composition, somewhere to set this up, and yeah, we'll, whatever this weather is, I guess we'll try and do either one of those. But so I'm not sure how well you can see, but see how dense those filters are. So it was Sun's gone in again now, so I'm going to revert back to F11 for I think a minute and a half or something. F11 3 minutes, F8 1 minute 18. Get a stopwatch set up, put this on timed exposure, F8. Now I guess we just wait. Okay, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that was the first exposure. What I'm probably going to do now is just try and find a few other little areas, probably with more moving people around this area, and try and capture that, I guess, look that I was going for in the first place, where it looks really busy but there's no people, but really and truthfully, yeah, there's a lot of people sitting around, so I'm a little bit dubious, but still, it might look cool with some long exposure stuff. I mean, you guys already know how that shot turned out. I have no idea. So anyway, let's have a little look around here, try and find some better compositions, and yeah, hopefully they come out all right. So I'm sort of just set here at the side of the column, and I've got the traffic stopping in front of me. So hopefully what I'm going to get is like these ghostly buses, you know, sort of like hanging out in front of Nelson's column. But then also I've gone down to, I think, F8 at this point with this exposure is like 3 minutes 20 or something. So actually, how long we got left? 1 minute 47. So yeah, hopefully gonna get some real ghostly things, although these buses are stopping for longer than I expected, so they might be more solid than I imagined. But this is the second one now, so you're gonna get like double ghost bus, I guess. Kind of cool. I'm interested to see how these turn out. Oh, here we go again. I look like such a doofus just sat in the middle of the street filming myself. But this is London. It's one of the great things about filming is city. Just like everyone has seen everything. So no matter how weird you think you feel, it's definitely not the weirdest thing they've seen today. It's crazy. Anyway, this is we're kind of dropping in light levels, so I'm gonna head up to Leicester Square and then onto Piccadilly Circus, because I do want to get some more locations in. I don't feel like I've got enough for today. And it's getting close to when I have to meet my mates. So yeah, after this shot, gonna push on up to one of those two. Anyway. So here at Piccadilly Circus, as you'd imagine, obviously very busy, but seems to be a little bit more movement. I've framed up the big screens on the side of the building with some of the pavement. So we're going to get a little bit of people who have stayed still, and we're going to get a little bit of people who are moving around as such. But yeah, it's somewhat the same as Trafalgar Square, where we got sort of half and half of movement and just people sitting still. So yeah, I'm going to take a meter reading for the shadows, because that's the buildings, because that's what the buildings are in at the moment. yeah, and in the highlights I'll just let them fall wherever they do. So yeah, I'm going to get this metered up and get an exposure off. The busker's just started up, so I've got a 3-minute 8-second long exposure, and I'm expecting there to maybe be a lot more people standing still than there would have been. Yeah, we're already getting people standing around. Oh yeah, your skin and bones turn to something beautiful. Hey, thanks for watching the video up until now. I thought it'd probably just be quite a good idea to maybe have a look at some of the images and close off, because these images actually turned out way better than I thought they were going to turn out. Of course, my original idea was for them to be like this kind of post-apocalyptic, empty area, and it just really didn't turn out like that. I mean, if you look at these images, obviously I explained it in the video, but you know, there's people sitting down, there's people just standing still, or even, you know, it's kind of a bit naive to think that I could probably erase everything to the point where, you know, it looked like it was empty. But that being said, you know, there's something for following through on an idea and sort of like seeing how it turned out. So, you know, looking through these images, I can see they're definitely nothing like super groundbreaking, but especially the ones at Piccadilly Circus, there's actually something I really like about them. I think where that sun was coming through the kind of like the between the buildings, and it was causing like this highlight to actually be sort of like hitting some people, and then other people were in shadow, and actually created like quite a lot of depth in the image, I think. Let's have a look at some of these other ones. Yeah, and this one here of Nelson's column in Trafalgar Square, there's just something quite nice about it. I quite like the sort of like underexposed one with the sky kind of all being, I guess, kind of blurry from the clouds being exposed for so long. In actual fact, I think this is probably one of the ones that worked the best in terms of erasing people. I can see a couple of people stood on the column itself, but for the most part, it actually looks like it's fairly empty. So yeah, definitely not turned out like that original idea I had all those years ago. And I think I would have been maybe somewhat disappointed with the outcome had I actually gone down to London to do this. But yeah, on the whole, I'm actually quite pleased with these images. Now, we've got to address a couple of things as well, issues-wise. This image in particular of the art gallery, there's a big overexposure and difference. It's almost like it's a lens flare, or a light leak, I should say, on the right-hand side of the image. Now, this is actually due to something very specific to long exposures, and that is actually, let me just grab my camera. So with the long exposure, obviously light's going into the camera through the lens through here, and there are some light seals, so when the mirror lifts up, the mirror should really be light tight against the prism. However, it's not as guaranteed as you'd expect it to be, and in actual fact, with very long exposures, you can actually get light go through the actual viewfinder, bounce around inside the prism, and actually leak onto the film. I'm not 100% sure this is what this light leak is, but this exposure was, I think 3 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong or whatnot. I think I say in the video, but yeah, that's enough time for light to be sort of like leaking into the viewfinder. Now this camera in particular, this is a Nikon F3, and it actually has this little tiny switch, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this because it's quite far away, but this little tiny switch actually puts like this little red curtain in front of the viewfinder, and that basically stops that from happening. The same thing on my D800 actually. Is a little grey. There's a little curtain that goes in front of the viewfinder, and that is for that exact thing, to stop light going through the viewfinder and, creating a light leak. So I didn't do that, I just forgot. So in the future, that's definitely something to look out for. So I think that about does it for this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate that my video schedule uploading thing is all over the place, and YouTube is still fairly new to me, and making video content and kind of finding a efficient way of filming, editing, and coming up with interesting video ideas, it's all stuff I'm still getting used to. So thank you if you're watching this and sticking around. Got some fun videos coming up in the future. I'm going to be 3D printing a panoramic back for a large format camera, and kind of saving a bunch of money by basically taking advantage of 3D printing rather than buying things, stuff like that. So that'll be cool. And also, I never really expected to ever do like tutorials, but I understand that quite a lot of the things I speak about in these videos are quite technical, and sometimes it's difficult to know the language and the how in depth I should go into the photography process, because as a photographer, these things are kind of second nature to me, and sometimes I forget that maybe someone who doesn't understand the intricacies of the language that we use in photography might get lost in and amongst everything I'm saying. So just if you're watching this, could you just comment and just let me know, like, basically, what level, like what your interests are. Are you a photographer? Are you interested in this? Or are you just kind of watching this from an outsider's perspective and just kind of interested in the content? It'll be interesting, because it might, I guess it will help me tailor towards making it more accessible for more people, because my whole idea behind this channel really is to just kind of like make this stuff more visible to more people, because I think more people who are taking images and creating things, the better. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.